The Legendarium podcast is brought to you
by you. So please visit patreon.com/legendarium
to support the show. But for now,
welcome to the Legendarium.
I was so excited for that Armando Sante version. I was so excited, and it just wasn't that great.
Of course it wasn't. It was a 90s made-for-TV miniseries.
The same era as the Sam Neill Merlin and the...
Sinbad, playing Sinbad.
Oh my god.
Yeah, this was the era we're talking about. Welcome everybody to The Legendarium, and welcome to another edition of our Author Shelf series, in which we ask a best-selling author to pull a favorite book from their shelf for us to discuss. It's a chance for us to read some excellent books, and it's also a chance for us to get to know our favorite authors in a fun and slightly different way. Today we're discussing the Odyssey. Yes, that Odyssey. I'm your host, Craig Hanks, and over there, every time I think I'm out, his sweet, sweet siren song pulls me back in. It's Ryan Bruckman.
And I'm just waiting for the chance to blind you in your one eye.
And when we booked him, I thought we were getting a Calypso, and now that he's here, he's clearly more of a Scylla. It's Brent Weeks.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
This is my favorite part, by the way, getting
monstrous things to you.
Wow. Getting a guest to thank me after insulting them is a lot of fun. So, Brent, very, very happy you're here. Before we get to the Odyssey, first of all, how are you feeling, Brent? 5 out of 5 published. They are in the can. They are shipped out. People are reading them as we publish.
Right. It's been, I mean, I'm not going to lie. It's kind of been a monkey on my back. I've been working on these Lightbringer books for 10 plus years now, and it kind of felt like this was never gonna happen. So the fact I reached the end, and at this point I didn't just finish. I feel good about how I finished. I feel great. Like I can be proud of what I've done, and that I gave it 100% of what I had. Feels really good. So it's been a long trek. I won't say long Odyssey. I just did.
Oh no!
I had to go there. Sorry. But it's been a long time. The fans have been really patient with me when I had to tell people that the last book was going to be delayed another year. I was terrified because I know that fans can get cranky with the waits in epic fantasy, and they were really awesome. So I'm really excited. I'm excited to share this with fans and see how people love it, because of course they're gonna love it, right?
Oh, absolutely. So they're excited. We're excited. As we're recording this, it hasn't yet been released, but by the time this episode is published, it came out on October 22nd. Is that right?
That's right.
So The Burning White is book 5 in what may be your magnum opus, unless you do something even better here going forward.
Mm-hmm. I hope I don't write anything longer.
Yeah, I think we all do, at a certain level. So I encourage people to go check it out. If you have not listened to our series on the Lightbringer, if you have not picked up those books, please do so. It's a new Legendarium favorite. I think it's fair to say we love them. I'm halfway through the series now, and I'm furiously reading through the last couple books to get ready for that release. So,
did they get you guys an early copy?
Yes. No. They got us an e-galley, but the electronic one. And that counts.
Fair enough. That's something. And you're like, I'm not even there yet. I don't know what to do with this e-galley. And it's just sitting there. And meanwhile, certain fans are like,
I've already gone through it. It's
okay.
Yeah.
It has been read. So.
And now I get the joy of sitting here in silence and not being able to say anything about it.
Right. Oh, nice. I was just hoping to sort of taunt fans, although, like, by the time this publishes, like you said, it'll be out, so it's kind of too late to taunt fans.
I don't mind a little time travel. I'm not Ken. That's fine. All right. So should we talk about the Odyssey?
Let's do. And thanks for letting me pick this. It felt like a little pretentious.
No. Here's the thing is, and longtime listeners know this about me, I love a little pretension. I think there's nothing wrong with a little pretension. Maybe it goes a long way, but I think it's a good thing.
You have a little bit with your breakfast each morning. I know.
And tell me a little bit about, before we get into the story itself, we'll talk more about the story, but why you picked it. What's your history with the Odyssey? Why is it that when I talked to you months ago and I said, what book might you pick? Instantly you said, yeah, probably the Odyssey.
Yeah. Well, I first encountered the Odyssey as a junior in high school, and had an amazing, just wonderful English teacher named J.L. Prezo, and she thought that this, ancient Greek literature, this piece from a culture far away and a time long ago that had something to say to teenagers. And she really championed it. We read it. I was like immediately struck by how great it was. I mean, it's great storytelling. It's fun. It's got themes that are clearly deep and meaningful to people for thousands of years now. And so we read it. We read like an abridged version. It's like, okay, let's skip the prologue stuff and let's go to book 9 and let's just get right into the adventure. But that was fine. It was a taste. It was enough. And then I read it in college again. I think in the Fagles translation. And then so this gave me a chance to be like, you know what? I reread it actually last year while I was writing The Burning White. And then I was like, you know what? I wanna have a chance to do a different translation of it this time. So I jumped in. I tried to do the Emily Wilson translation, which is a new translation that's getting raves. Claire Danes does the narration for it, and I didn't like the sample. So I love Claire Danes. I love the Odyssey. I thought they'd be great together, but it wasn't working for me for some reason. So I found something else, and I listened to the WHD something Rouse, I think, translation with Anthony Heald doing the voices, who was astonishingly good. He was so good. And the translation wasn't quite as good, but it had some really good positives. So I guess that's my history. My roommate in college was is now he's a classics major, and we talk about this sort of stuff. So it's really fun stuff to interact with again and again.
You know what?
And see how I feel about it over time.
How come my old friend sitting next to me here can't be something valuable like a classics professor or?
Well, that's because my introduction to something like the Odyssey came from the PBS series Wishbone, where the dog played Odysseus.
Wait, what even is Wishbone? I'm not part of that fandom.
Wait, you're serious though? Wishbone?
I'm serious.
Yeah, it's a little dog. It was a PBS series with a little dog, and the dog would get dressed up. This is live action, but it would get dressed up in costumes and
go through classics and literature, and the dog would play the hero
or something.
Yeah,
and he was Odysseus, and this dog shoots the arrow through 12 axes. It is the most amazing story. It brought me a great love of the Odyssey.
I think I might have shown up on the wrong podcast.
All right, so let's talk about the story. Let's get into the Odyssey itself. I've got a little synopsis here. Please, a synopsis for the Odyssey. Here we go. Everybody stop rolling your eyes. The Odyssey is, of course, the second of 2 epic poems by the ancient Greek storyteller Homer. It follows Odysseus after the fall of Troy as he tries to get back home to his beloved wife and homeland. Things don't go as planned. It takes a long time. Many adventures are had. It's the Odyssey. You probably know most of this already. If you've never read it, though, you should, especially if you enjoy this little thing we talk about on the podcast sometimes called epic fantasy, because that's exactly what this is. We have cliffhangers and flashbacks and POV shifts. We have a mythology that you could just as easily call world building. We have a charismatic lead, an impetuous son, monsters and goddesses and journeys, and all the trappings of what we modern fantasy readers would expect, just without the same vocabulary. All you need is a little shift in your perspective and a decent translation, and you're off to the races. I had a great time reading this one, Brent, and you had suggested the Fagles translation. This is Robert Fagles. He did both the Iliad and the Odyssey, and I discovered I I went back and looked. I actually read his translation of the Iliad in college, but I had read somebody else's translation of the Odyssey. And no surprise, I really enjoyed the Iliad and wasn't so hot on the Odyssey at the time. And when I picked this one up, I read the first few paragraphs and I went, oh my word, this is readable. Yeah. It's really something. And this one is, if you go on Audible and get an Audible edition, it's the Fagles translation read by Ian McKellen, which is pretty great.
Oh my gosh, I missed that the Audible one had Ian McKellen. Oh, jeez.
I'm sure the other one's good too, but Ian McKellen, yeah, I'll have Gandalf read me the Odyssey. I'm fine with that. So
really bringing the epic fantasy thing home there.
Yeah, anyway, so Fagles' translation was good. I thought, Ryan, what was your experience diving into the Odyssey this time around?
Basically, aside from, the dog version that I was aware of.
The Odyssey. I want to hear about the Odyssey.
Yes.
I want to hear your thoughts on the 1997 Armand Assante miniseries.
Oh, I remember that actually.
Do you remember it?
I do remember that.
Maybe we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
What did you think of the Odyssey, Ryan?
Really, really enjoyed this. I obviously hadn't really come across other translations. I've read through parts of his story in other things, but never the full piece. Mm-hmm. And so I've never really realized the variations in translations and how you could get such a different piece from one person's telling versus
a different
another
feeling from it.
Yeah. So reading this one, I was like, oh yeah, because I remember you messaging me and being like, you should get we were doing the Fagles translation, and I've already started it, and it's quite readable. And I was like, oh, I would hope so. Like, it's literature.
Yeah, until you read some of the other ones.
Yeah, and so for me, like, it was nice to not have to be battling language to understand what I was going through. Yeah. To follow the story. And honestly, the beginning was a totally brand new thing, because I can remember the story, like Odysseus's stories, like those.
Hey, he's out on the sea.
Yeah, I remember this. I remember the story of the Cyclops and the Sirens. I know all that, but the story of Prince Telemachus, his son, like that totally had out my mind. I totally didn't remember that. So it was a whole new story to me at the beginning, until we get back to him coming back, basically.
Right. And I was really excited. I remembered the Telemachus stuff because of the Armand Assante version, and I remember the bloodbath at the very, very end, and I'm like, I gotta get there. And, so I was excited to get to that stuff.
I was so excited for that Armand Assante version. I was so excited, and it just wasn't that great.
Of course it wasn't. It was a 90s made-for-TV miniseries.
The same era as the Sam Neill Merlin and the...
Sinbad playing Sinbad.
Oh my god.
Yeah, this was the era we're talking about, but it did have a few images that stuck with me for sure. Anyway, well, shoot. Now that's all I want to talk about now is Armand Assante, and this is not correct.
He has that way of changing things.
He just gets into under your skin. All right. So, Brent, I want to kick it to you and ask you about how you feel about the relationship between the Odyssey and modern fantasy, epic fantasy. As far as, the way it's structured and the things that we see, the themes that come up and the styles and all of that.
I think it's one of those things that, the connections are incredibly deep, but some of them are hidden. Like I would guess that a bunch of my contemporaries have not read it, or have not read the whole thing, and yet. Go one generation back and everybody would have read it. I was reading Roger Zelazny, Chronicles of Amber, and I read like one of his, and Chronicles of Amber is definitely written more to a mass audience who's trying to sell a lot of books, and he absolutely did. But like I was like, you know what? I found out he was much more respected in the science fiction fantasy community for his short fiction, and holy crap, talk about erudite stuff in there. And it's like he was clearly deeply versed in all the Western and all the Eastern classics as well. And so like guys like that, just one generation back, I think would have known this backward and forward. These days, I'm not so sure that everybody knows it well. They're kind of like, oh yeah, the Odyssey, but I don't know how many people have read it 3 times or two times or even all the way once. I think they probably saw the Armando Sante version and they just gave it up. I go, okay, that's great. There it is. But I do think a lot of the things survive from this. Like there's a and we've ditched some of them, like the elevated language, right? Like that kind of was a big part of fantasy. Like, okay, you're talking about these great men, and it was a lot men, and like so you have to have this like very formalistic kind of language, which from Fegel's note, of course, I don't read ancient Greek, but Fegel's talks about how the language is that wasn't common street Greek that people are speaking in Homer's or even in Athenian times. Like people had to like look up words, and they had to like you have to have special word lists because your normal vocabulary wouldn't include the stuff that is in this epic. So elevated language was one of the big parts of times. Vast journeys, big cast of characters. All these things are definitely part of our common heritage, though, for sure.
And it reminds me a little bit of the Beatles, where you talk to rock stars now, and it's like not all of them are going to appreciate or even acknowledge how much they get from the Beatles. But it's there. It's in the water. It's everybody, right?
Homer and the Beatles. Okay. Connected.
Okay, so maybe we just start with. I don't want to do a whole recap of the whole story because, like you said, like we both said, everybody kind of
most people know the mythology behind it. Like they know the basics there.
So let me just kick it to you, Ryan, and say, now that you've read the whole thing, what's your favorite scene? Now that you've heard of the Cyclops, you've heard of the sirens and all that. Now, what's your favorite?
I'm going for the low-hanging fruit here. My favorite is still Odysseus' homecoming, coming in as the beggar, getting rid of the suitors, and stringing the bow, shooting through the 12. Like that is still to me such a great finale. It's a great action sequence, but it's also nice to give Odysseus something other than just coming in and being the hero. Like it wasn't him just coming and kicking in the door and saying "I'm home, everybody" and killing everybody. It was still there was some guile to it. There was a little bit of cunning. And things
you
like
did
that.
Not just use the word guile in front of Brent Weeks. I know you didn't do that.
I apologize.
I appreciated that.
If I had to pick one, I would probably go with Aeolus, the god of wind. So they get to his island, and he's like, "Yeah, sure, I'll help you out. Here's a bag full of wind."
Yeah,
right. And so he's by the way, don't open it up or you're screwed. And so they put it on the boat. They get within sight of Ithaca, and Odysseus is asleep, and his dumbass crew is like, "Oh, I know. Let's open it." And anyway, so they open it, and it blows the ship back to Aeolus. And Odysseus is like, sheepishly, he's like, "Hey, can I have another one of those things?" And Aeolus says, "No, I'm good. You are clearly cursed. Please leave." And so there's something. It's at the same time, it's a heartbreaking scene. He's trying to get home. He's within sight of home, and then he loses his goal. So you feel for him, and then in the same sequence of events, it's also pretty funny.
Mm-hmm.
In a way. I mean, I was chuckling while I was reading it. So anyway, all right, Brent, what's your favorite?
Well, I remember when I was in high school, I don't know why I remember this, but my favorite part was there's just this little snippet when he comes home and he's a beggar and the suitors are like, let's make the beggars fight, which, gee, that's awesome. Sorry, that wasn't my favorite part. No, don't cut me there.
Thank you for joining us on the Legendarium. Yeah, we've been talking with Brent Weeks.
So Odysseus is sitting there, and he's got to fight this other beggar, whose name is Iris or whatever, and he's like, huh, and he just has this moment where he thinks, should I kill him with one punch? And when I was 17 years old, I just thought that was so badass. like should I just kill this guy with a punch, or should I go easy? I'll go easy on him, and he just breaks his jaw. which I thought that was amazing. Now I'm a little older than 17,
How
And-
much
and-
older, Brent? Let's dig into that. No,
I
I'm just
know,
kidding.
I know. I am 2 times 17 and half a score. No, I'm not that much. Less than that. I couldn't come up with a great one off the top of my head. Um, the thing I really liked was after the homecoming, when Penelope tests him, when Penelope tests Odysseus. I think Penelope is just a fascinating character, and that she doesn't immediately like fall into his arms and go, "Oh, Odysseus, you're such a hunk." It's like that you see that this woman is strong and intelligent, and she's a match for him. Like you can believe that you've got this guy who's absolutely the epitome of cunning intelligence, Metis. And like this wife, this is the right woman for him. That she's his equal. And so I love that she tricks him, and he's been tricking everybody all along, and she ticks him off. The story, for those of you, it's been a while, is she makes him prove who he is by saying, "Oh yeah, hey nurses, would you move our bed out into the hall?" And he's like, "What? Move our bed? I carved that bed myself out of a living tree trunk." And then he tells all the things he did, and like, nobody could move my bed if that was our secret thing, and that was definitely me. And she's like, "Oh, you are you." It's so that she riles him up is kind of awesome. So I love that part.
I agree. Penelope is a great character. I like the idea. We don't get much of her in the beginning, but we do see a little bit of her kind of stringing along the suitors in a very cunning way. So yeah, she's great. Speaking of the beginning though, I want to talk about the structure of this and how, I read at least pieces of this, if not all of it, a long time ago. And so it had been a long, long time since I'd come to it. And I was really surprised by the structure of this. I didn't do any pre-reading. I just dove in, and we get chapters. They're books, but they're basically chapters. We get 4 chapters of what do we want to call it? The Telemachus POV, right? Is what we'd call it.
Telemachy. It's literally called the Telemachy. It's Telemachus stuff.
Right. Yeah, and it kind of bookends the Odysseus stuff. And so he is searching for his father, and he's trying to find out information. And so he finds out, you get the story of, was it the story of Calypso from somebody who's telling it to him? Oh yeah, your father got captured by Calypso, and so it tells him the story of what happened with Odysseus on the island with Calypso. And then he says, "Yeah, go here if you want some more information." So he goes and he gets more info, and then you get these flashback scenes, and it's a really kind of an interesting and complex structure that I think actually works really well. Again, if we get past the ancient language and the translation issues and all that stuff, if you were to rewrite it but lay it out in the same way, I don't think people would have too much of a problem, modern audiences, with the way it's structured. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I find it complex, but artful. I mean, it's you can understand what's going on. It's like, well, let's set out the real problem, and the real problem is thematically of the book is that he's been gone a really long time, and it's a problem that we should care about because things are terrible at home, and his son is not in charge, and his son's getting to the age where he's going to be in danger, and you get to see that, and his son is growing up without his dad and seeing the fallout of the war and all that stuff. And then a lot of the stuff we kind of get to skip, like, okay, he's on this island for 7 years. Well, that's sad, but it's kind of boring. So let's just get that. He's there. Okay, time passes. You get to just go past that, and so I really like how it goes, and doing that thing of like a son searching for his father. Like, where did my dad go? Who was this guy? Do people like him? So.
Yeah, and then we go back to Odysseus and go through all of his adventures, and that takes up the middle portion of the book. But then we go back to Telemachus at the end, and there's a great cliffhanger, by the way. I loved it at the end of book 4, when Athena tells Telemachus, or I can't remember. but anyway, the suitors are after him. And it's like, yeah, as soon as he gets back to Ithaca, we're going to stab him in the back. We'll get rid of him. Then we'll marry his mom. She'll be thrilled, you know? But then it cuts. It immediately cuts to Odysseus. And you're like, whoa, wait. Now I'm interested. What's going on with Telemachus? And then you go back, you go through all the Odysseus stuff. And then what is it, book like 18 or something? You go back to Telemachus and his adventures with the suitors, kind of preparing for the arrival of Odysseus, story-wise anyway. Ryan, were you ever confused by the structure?
Structure, no. As long as I was paying attention to, while I was listening through, as long as I was paying attention, I never really had an issue with the structure or figuring out where we were or anything like that. I do think that I agree that it would translate well. I think it would be a little weird for a modern audience to dedicate, in with the way that we tend to consume media now, so much time to your main character at the beginning, and then all of a sudden, oh, that's not my main character for 16 chapters,
Sure.
you know, convert that into a TV series. All of a sudden okay, and then we're going to come back to him. You know, that might be a little bit of a translation thing for a modern audience to wrap their head around. But as a whole, I agree. This follows. I love the fact that we kind of continue and we get multiple short stories of Odysseus' adventures that are easy to follow and finish along this larger arc, which is pretty standard.
And that probably stems from, as I understand it, and I am no expert on this stuff, but this was an oral tradition
Right.
before it was written down, and so you couldn't tell the entire thing in one sitting, and it's more like, you know, okay, when last we left the campfire.
Same Odysseus channel, same Odysseus time.
Right.
Right.
Um,
Sorry.
No. Anyway, yeah, that's just it reminded me when you were talking about how it's kind of adventure of the week. It feels like adventure of the week, and that's exactly probably what it was at the time, right?
Yeah, this is one of the things that has made me believe, just intuitively, because I'm not a scholar by any stretch of the imagination, that Homer was one dude, and that he was a guy who actually was a very talented bard himself, of course, who wrestled this into one story, because there is clearly an episodic nature to the content. And as I was listening this time, it came out even more to me. Like when Odysseus tells these little lie stories, and he lies every time people ask him who he is. It's kind of fun. Like you can see that there's little hooks that he's laying down, that a bard would be laying down of like, oh yeah, well that was the time I was off doing this thing, and he sort of mentions maybe a real story, or he pretends he was a real character off somewhere else, and you're like, I could see the guys being like, oh, hey, last night you mentioned that there was this cool story about this guy who went to Egypt. We want to hear that one tonight. And so to me, it's like Homer had taken all of these stories, put them into one, but made them into a thing that I think I think they still do this every once in a while, or yearly. They recite it in ancient Greek, some festival, but it takes 18 hours. So you definitely wouldn't be doing that one night. Probably if a guy's wandering around, he would give you a 1 hour story. He'd give you one chapter. And so you'd be like, oh, we want our favorite one. We want this one, which to me, there's certain things that kind of bother me when I'm reading through it. It's like, oh, here's Penelope like crying again, or here Odysseus is crying again. And like every chapter. And it's like, oh, because you might not have been listening to all the chapters all together, you need to remember he's upset that he's not home yet. So that if all you get this month is, and you're hearing other stories on other nights, that you understand, oh yeah, Odysseus, the guy who wants to get home. Yeah, okay, it's his story. And so some of those elements that before I thought were really redundant, they make sense to me more if somebody's bringing together an episodic content to show you.
Right.
If you're only hearing one snippet, tell us about Odysseus and the guy who gets his eye poked out.
And speaking
I want
of
the eye story, sir.
Yeah, right.
Speaking of redundancy, that brings up something that I had to chuckle about a little bit, because I was thinking a lot as I was reading through the story about how it relates to modern fantasy and what we've taken from the Odyssey. And there's a common complaint among many of our listeners and other readers of, oh, let's just pluck something out of the blue, the Wheel of Time. There's a lot of braid tugging and skirt smoothing and, whatever other phrases, right? There are these little ticks that authors have. I'm sure you don't have any, Brent. There are no ticks for you, right?
Hey, if you've gotten halfway through the series and you haven't noticed them yet, yes.
No, but this idea of ticks, and when we talk about this oral tradition of the Odyssey, and somebody's got to memorize all this stuff so that you can tell it night after night after night, they come up with these little shorthand phrases to help you remember what's okay, I got to get into this story. Wait, was it daytime or nighttime? Okay, the sun peeked her red hands over the horizon, and that's like the beginning of every single chapter, right? And so that's the shorthand for, okay, it's daytime and I'm setting it up. And then the other one was the wine dark sea. He's constantly sailing across, or at least that's this translation. That's how Fagles does it. The wine dark sea. And so, there's these little things. If you ever feel like complaining that, some author uses a little tick like that, just think, how many words is Lightbringer, Brent? Maybe 15.
It's a little close to 1.5 million.
Million and a half, yeah, 1.5 million. You write 1.5 million words without developing any little ticks like that. Yeah. Let's see how you do.
Well, I mean, in defense of Homer and less in defense of myself and other fellow writers, unfortunately, they were working with Poetic Lines and the dactylic hexameter, which is not the easiest thing to you've got to fit everything into this meter. And so if you're telling the story and you're like dawn, orange, what rhymes with orange? Okay, every time I have to mention something orange, I'm going to have a certain way I do it because that way works and every other way is a pain in my butt. Mm-hmm. So like you don't want to be thinking about that. You're just like, it's dawn. How do I establish this? And how does the song go at this point if they're singing certain portions? And heck, if I know how that worked. So it gave them little shorthand things of like, this line works. And like with Odysseus, I can make these stresses work. So you're going to have little things that just like, okay, that actual whole sentence works. I don't have to think about it 1 million times. Plus everybody's familiar with it because all the other poets are lazy in the same way. So they have to contend with that. Us, we don't have to contend with that. We just have to contend with cranky editors, I guess.
Well, there's that. I should have been an editor. Oh, that would have been
missed your calling in life.
Oh, man.
There you go.
Oh, I could have been. I would have had an excuse for all this crankiness. Okay. So let's go to some listener questions. I asked for listener questions from our group on Discord. If you haven't joined our Discord community, you're welcome to do so. There's lots of real-time conversation going on there. I didn't anticipate a ton of questions. Like when I ask for questions, hey, what do you want us to talk about when we read Lightbringer? They come in pretty fast and furious. This one was a little lighter, but I did get a few. So here is one from Huron Fan, and we'll open this up to the group. What parts of the Odyssey do you think are timeless, and what doesn't age well from a storyteller's perspective? So we've probably touched on this a little bit, but maybe we can just address the question directly. Is there anything that still works and anything that doesn't quite? And I'll throw one out there first and give you guys a chance to think for a moment. Ryan, you already brought it up. The climax, the end of the book, when Odysseus unveils himself and he shoots the bow through the arrow through the axes and then massacres the crap out of everybody. There's nothing subtle about that. But anyway, what works about that and what is familiar, I think, and has been carried through for time immemorial is this. There are lots of different shapes of stories, but all of them they're all building towards something, or at least they should be building towards something. And you get that you're putting all these puzzle pieces together, and who are your characters, and what have they gone through, and what's the point of it all? And so you've got the suitors, and you've got Telemachus, and you've got Penelope, and you've got Odysseus, and they've gone through all this stuff, and then you throw them all together for this explosive finale. And then you turn that in, Brent turns something like that into his editor, and he's like, you nailed it. Great. I think the ending works perfectly.
It's a recognizable piece that even nowadays, I mean, we all have Christmas dinner with family and things like that, right? Where you just want it to end in a massacre.
Where you just take an axe to somebody's neck. You're like, I've had enough of you, Uncle Joe.
Okay, maybe not that much, but so I have something that I've been thinking about a lot, and I haven't come down yet on my exactly where I feel on this. So maybe you can enlighten me here as to whether or not it works. commonly in this period, we have a lot of involvement by the gods themselves.
Sure.
Hermes, Athena. We have this. Nowadays, people tend to get a little hesitant when they read something and a deity figure steps in and takes a hand in the story.
The supernatural.
Does that translate as well to a modern audience? It still works for the story. There's no problem with it in the story. But would that, if this was new today, would a modern audience kind of come back on this and say, no, you've got way too many deities coming in and adjusting things?
He's not doing it for himself. He's, they're shepherding him through the story.
Right.
Of course he made it home.
Because the gods, maneuvered their pawn to where he needed to be.
Yeah. I don't know. That's a great question. Would that work? I guess I had never thought about it because it's just part of the Odyssey. And you never, I mean, far be it from two people like us to critique the Odyssey, right? So I've never thought about it. Okay, Brent, you critique the Odyssey. What do you think?
Like I said, sorry, Holmes, this doesn't work. Okay, I like chapter 3, but chapter 1 through there, no, this isn't where your story starts. So I think you're totally right. The Dia ex machina or whatever it is, it's Athena, right? Like it literally ends, and Odysseus has killed all these guys. Well, they have family, and the Oresteia ends almost exactly the same way, which is written in classical era Athens. It's like you kill my people, I have to kill your people. And what does that get you? It gets you people killing each other back and forth. So he kills all these suitors. They all have family. They all come after him. You have this one last scene where he gets to fight with his dad and his son. It's kind of but it's like they're not going to be able to kill everybody. And Athena has to show up, and she has to be like, okay, that's enough, guys, put it down. and they're like, oh crap, it's Athena. We better not fight her. So like within the culture, it totally works. Today, it wouldn't work because we don't like that. Mm-hmm. We don't like things just working out for the hero because they do. It's like, well, that's not hardcore enough. He should die at the end.
Yeah.
This should be a grimdark story.
I just have this visual right now of John Wick and his dog fighting everybody until a deity comes down and like, all right, put the guns up.
That's awesome. Oh man, I never realized I want that to happen, but I want that to happen. Okay, sorry, go on.
So I think we don't really have invocations to muses anymore. Like, okay, what was that? How'd that, what? That just leaves us completely adrift. And like you said, like, there's a big chunk at the beginning with Telemachus, and you're like, okay, this is my guy. And I was like, well, no, were you not paying attention during the invocation? That's not your guy. You just need to have all these chapters with Telemachus, but understand he's not your guy. He's not the main guy. So these days, it's like, no, you got to get your main character on the page pretty quickly. And so that wouldn't, it's not that it doesn't work. It's that modern audiences wouldn't appreciate it as much. So I have kind of this this way I approach works like the Odyssey. It's like, this is like, you don't go to France and ask for ketchup on your burgers or whatever, or I mean on your, can I have ketchup with this steak, please? You have an amount of humility, hopefully, when you even go and visit another country, right? And wait, did you go to France?
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Did you ever ask for ketchup on your?
No. I was lectured long and hard before I went out to France that you don't do that sort of thing.
Right. So like when we approach something that's super old like this, like assuming that they have the same cultural values that we do is like, well, they don't. And so when I'm trying to judge, like there's parts of the Odyssey that really bother me. Like when they kill the women who've been sleeping with the suitors. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, they're servant women / slave women, right? Like, it's a little fuzzy what exactly they are. They're somewhere in there. But either way, are those women really consenting? Do they have consent powers here? Why? And then Odysseus says, he's like, okay, well, these guys, they dishonored us. I don't know what that means. I don't know how what they're doing sexually actually was understood, how that culture understood that to reflect on Odysseus. Like, he's gone. What do you care who they're sleeping with? So I don't understand that. But then he says, go and stab him, like kill him with the sword, right? Okay, well, that's bad, right? Like go murder these 12 women. And then Telemachus is like, no, that's not bad enough. And so he strangles them. You know, he lifts them up, he hangs them, and it's like, wow, so you're even more bloodthirsty than Dad, which, good job, Dad, for being less bloodthirsty. But like I don't know how the audience that originally would have heard this would have felt about that. Would they have been like, yep, they got what was coming to them, because you don't do that to a master of a house? Or would they have been like, ooh, man, Telemachus
pretty rough. Did Homer just go through a breakup or something? Because he seems a little angry right now.
Right. So did you guys run into any of those things that sort of like, that kind of bothers me?
Yeah, I guess I tend to be extremely forgiving, and so I let a lot of that stuff go because of exactly what you're talking about. Okay. It's like, yeah, I don't know. Hey, do I like it? No, of course not. But I don't latch onto these things and think about them for a long time. What about you, Ryan?
For me, he's kind of established a morality earlier with Penelope, and the fact that she's been very strong and reserved and everything there. So when you have other characters whose morality is very, very different in here, to me, I had a hard time. Like, it bothers me that like they go and they kill these women, or the sirens, things like that. Anyway, that train crashed. I'm going to move off that train of thought. But basically,
this is fun.
Yes, thank you. You're a great host, leaving me stranded. Yeah, so moments of where morality doesn't seem to be consistent across the board, I usually just kind of look at that and go, okay, must be a thing of the times, and let that go. Like, that's where that would be for me.
Right. Yeah, I am so unfamiliar with ancient Greek culture that I just decided I couldn't interpret any of that, and I just took the story as I found it, kept it fairly surface level when it came to characters' actions. So, sorry, go ahead.
I had a different on that. I'm just like, I don't know enough to judge on the violence thing. I think Homer plays it beautifully, and I think we do see enough violence in Homer that we can take some judgments, or we can make some guesses. And it's like, I think he was like writing or reciting for an audience that was clearly like, some of this violence is awesome. Like, this is exciting, it's fun. You know, if you think about even the pre-modern era, like, your audience would have skewed young, right? Like probably half the people would have been under 30, if not more than that. You know, most people would have been there. There were lots of young people there who were like, yeah, kick ass. And like the gory, I mean, here's how the spear goes through the guy's teeth and like out the back of his neck, and he's flopping around like a fish. You know, you're like, holy, that is really gross and kind of awesome. And then other times you've got like right after Odysseus is done killing the suitors, he lets the women out of their apartments, because he told them, hey, go to your apartments and lock the doors, don't come out, it's going to get ugly. They come out and they're like, yeah, you guys killed the suitors, that's friggin' awesome. And he kind of goes, Odysseus goes, it's not right to celebrate the death of these men. You're like, well, wait, that seems like a really modern kind of approach, you know, like it's
which is it?
Yeah, which is it? And I think that reflects a tension that we all feel. Like I think Odysseus comes across like the old warrior. He's like, sometimes you got to kill people, but you don't get excited about it. Whereas I think the audience gets excited about it. And so I think a skilled storyteller makes you, and probably, you know, he's always depicted as being older. He understands what works for the audience, but he also wants to show them, yeah, there's times with violence, but then there's times to like be like, this is awful too. Mm-hmm. And so with that, he strikes for me a great balance of telling this warlike story, but making it real and bringing some of it home. Sorry for the pun. But the other things I can't judge as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we've probably addressed Huron fans' question pretty well at this point. So let's go to, well, no, actually, we've probably done Combat Wombat's question as well. I love that name, by the way. So if you do join our Discord community, please come up with an awesome screen name like Combat Wombat, who I believe is from your neck of the woods, Brent. But he asked about what we think about, or what Brent thinks about Homer's relationship between the gods and men, and whether that gives us any insight into your writing. But I think we kind of talked about a little bit about that already. So,
right.
Okay.
I mean, Gavin Guile is loosely inspired by Odysseus. That's the original inspiration for the character. Absolutely.
I did notice you mentioned to somebody on Twitter a week or two ago that they asked what Gavin Guile looks like, and you said, imagine Odysseus, kind of a curly mop of what is it, golden hair or like reddish golden?
Yeah,
hair?
Red gold hair or something, coppery. Yeah,
coppery. That's what it is. Yeah. Anyway, so
one assumes not oxidized. But...
but actually, that brings up another Huron fan question, which was anything you specifically took from the Odyssey that you used in your work or as an inspiration. And so we've got Gavin Guile as loosely inspired by Odysseus. Anything else that you loved from this story so much you had to use it? I've got one.
Yeah, okay, please, what?
Lost at Sea. I'm not going to. We're not here to spoil Lightbringer, but at a certain point there is a Lost at Sea situation, and
yeah.
So
I think I don't like to. I don't like to do fan interpretation for them. I don't like to say this is the thing I took from that.
Yeah.
But as you can see, I love the Odyssey, and I think I wanted to do a Mediterranean culture or the blend of a bunch of Mediterranean cultures. I wanted to do ancient some blind spots that people have on things like slavery or people in lower classes without invoking American chattel slavery. I wanted to look at different ways things were done in the ancient world. So it's a big influence. It's there for me.
And it's there for other people to interpret.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
It's helpful to know to interpret me, I guess.
There you go. Okay. Yeah. You want to know Lightbringer? Go read the Odyssey, and probably some other stuff too. Okay. All right. Here's one. What modern book contains your favorite adaptation or reinterpretation of the Odyssey? My answer to this is, I have no idea. That's beyond me. I don't know that I've ever read a modern reinterpretation of the Odyssey. Ryan, have you?
No, I mean, the Odyssey is a kind of a difficult one to put a new skin on and not see it as the Odyssey or not just call it right as it is, versus something like Orpheus and Eurydice, where you can tell that story and change character names and people don't catch it quite as clearly. So I'm trying to think of...
I don't know, but you could do it like 10 Things I Hate About You is just Shakespeare in disguise. There's lots of those, right?
Yeah, but the thing is, like, you recognize those, you see that.
Right. Yeah, but I wonder, Brent, do you know of any modern reinterpretations like that?
There was a guy who really hit it well and wrote this book called Ulysses. It's clever. I catch it the first 6 times I read that book, but I finally got it by the end.
So you went with modern, not contemporary. That's fair enough. Fair enough.
I think you said modern, and I was going to use it regardless of what you said because it was the only thing that came to mind. I mean, you've got to have a little bit of, pardon me, hubris to retell the Odyssey. It's like, oh, here is a cornerstone, if not the cornerstone of Western literature. Do that again, better.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, brother, where art thou?
Brother, where art thou? Yeah, that's great. I bet
something.
that's what they're going for.
There you go. Nicely done. George Clooney.
So
our modern day Odysseus, right?
Yeah. Oh gosh. Oh,
only when he's in a bat suit.
Heaven help us. Yeah. Wait. Odysseus wept. I think we all wept over those nipples. Okay. So thank you, Kiptan, for the question. Thank you, everybody, for the question. What do you think? Should we call it there? Do we feel like we've talked about the Odyssey? Is there any final thoughts? Any final thoughts on this?
Does this podcast end in a massacre? Like, I just want to know because I'm...
Well, I mean, Brent is not here in studio, so he's safe. I have no promises for you.
If I see blood splashing on the walls there, I'm just hanging up. Just so you know.
No, Your Honor, I saw nothing. Okay.
Yeah, I think we've kind of, I don't know that we've done it justice.
No.
I think we've talked our way around it a little bit.
So, yeah, I guess I would just echo kind of what I said at the beginning, which is this reminds me a lot of the Beatles. And if you feel like I love rock and roll, I love music, well, you need to know the Beatles. Even if it's not your favorite band, you need to understand them and know where all this stuff came from. I feel very similarly about this, especially now having refreshed on it and read it cover to cover. It's like, oh my gosh, no, this is incredibly important if we like epic fantasy or really storytelling in general. But epic fantasy is a very clear, direct, it's a very clear line down.
I'm not helping you. You left me stranded earlier.
Damn,
direct descendant of yes.
Anyway, so please do read it and enjoy it and take your time with it. Go let Ian McKellen put you to sleep some nights listening to the Odyssey. It's delightful.
And you can just skip forward to book 9 if things are going rough for you. Is book 9 where he gets to the Phaeacians and he starts retelling his whole story?
Yeah, it sounds about right.
I think that's about right.
I didn't keep close track of the books.
Right, sorry.
All right. In the meantime, if it's taking a little while for Amazon to ship your copy of the Odyssey to you, go buy The Burning White, book 5 of the Lightbringer series. Brent, congratulations on finishing your series. It really is. I mean, I hope it's not patronizing for the guy who's never written a book to say this, but it's really quite the accomplishment. It's a great series. We've really enjoyed it, and we're glad that you wrote it.
Well, thank you very much. I'm thanks for taking the time to do your reviews and for inviting me to come to share some time with you.
I couldn't get a response.
Sorry about that.
Siri really wanted in on the podcast, I think. So.
Never get away. It's like the wrath of Zeus. If you're a suitor and you think you've got away with it, it'll show up in your house.
All right. Thank you so much, Brent, for coming on. And we may see if we have time to stick around and do something else, but we'd publish that later. So thanks everybody for listening. Go to patreon.com/legendarium to support the show. If you haven't yet done so, go to thelegendarium.reddit.com and join the conversation there, or find us on Discord. Hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, whatever, if you need a link for that. Thank you so much for listening, everybody, and we will see you for probably the continuation of our Lightbringer series, podcast series coming up. So thanks for listening. See you next time. Brent, just a little bit more. Say anything.
Yeah, last time I did a test, it didn't go so well.
We broke everything, so.
I'm feeling good now. All right.
I think when people say break the internet, that's not what they mean.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we feel like we're ready. Talk about the Odyssey.
Oof, I feel so underprepared in so many ways, but yes.
Yeah. Well, let's just. You're not.
As
I
much
promise.
depth, we'll have as much depth as there is a Cyclops in their perception.
Yeah.
So
you may never have listened to an episode, but if you had, you would know there is no such thing as underprepared for the Legendarium. So.
Okay.
All right. Here we go.